Our next speaker is perhaps best known for his strong leadership during the dark days that followed the terrorist attacks of 9/11. He forged a steadfast partnership with New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani in the immediate response to the terrorist attacks while gracefully honoring those who had fallen. He led the emotional and physical renewal and rebuilding of New York City and of New York State as a whole. George Pataki began his political career as mayor of his hometown of Peekskill, New York, and then moved on to the New York State legislature and was elected governor of New York in 1994, defeating liberal icon Mario Cuomo. Governor Pataki served 3 terms as governor, being reelected in 1998 and 2002. For a Republican in heavily Democrat New York, that's no small feat. While in Albany, Governor Pataki worked to lessen the burden of decades of big government policies and high taxes on the private sector. He cut 19 different taxes, saving New Yorkers $140 billion. And as a fiscal conservative, Governor Pataki erased a $5 billion deficit and left the state with its best credit rating in 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you the 53rd governor of the state of New York, George Pataki.
What a crowd. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I call you our fellow freedom fighters here at the Freedom Summit. And by the way, we have any New Yorkers, former New Yorkers here this afternoon? I thought so. You know, when I was governor and I come down to South Carolina and ask people, were they from New York? And they'd say, yes, I get a little upset because I knew I was going to change the state. But there's another Cuomo in power again. Liberalism doesn't work, so I can't blame you for being down here in South Carolina this afternoon. You know, coming down, I've been following the news this week, and I thought I'd listen to what the media sees as a crisis and a very real scandal and concern in America with all the challenges we face. And I've been following it, and of course, it involves missing emails, failure to turn over a cell phone when the investigators looked at it. You know, if you listen to the media, the biggest crisis about cell phones or email servers or email messages is whether or not the Patriots deflated some footballs before a football game. I'll tell you, there's a legitimate crisis dealing with lost emails, destroyed emails, a private server that won't be turned over. The NFL spent 6 months investigating and appointed a lawyer, the equivalent of a special prosecutor, to investigate the New England Patriots. How about the Justice Department appointing a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton's illegal use of emails and illegal destruction of 30,000 emails? You know, this is a great conference, and I heard a number of the speakers, and it's been just a tremendous day. And I wanted to be here. And I thought about it when Jeff Duncan invited me, and I said, you know, I have a great life. I love what I do. I had the privilege of leading New York for 12 years. My family is great. My kids are thriving. Everything is great unless I turn on the TV, open a newspaper, or go on the internet. I'm here this afternoon for one simple reason. I think the threat to our freedom here in the United States of America is the greatest today that it's been in my lifetime. And that threat is twofold. First, it's a domestic threat from an ever-growing, more powerful Washington, D.C. and federal government where they think they have the right and the ability to run our lives and tell us how to lead our lives. That is an enormous threat. And the second threat to our very freedom is, of course, radical Islam. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of them this afternoon. You know, I look at Washington, and I think back to when the founding fathers created this country and how brilliant they were You know what they thought was the greatest threat to the new freedom they had earned in the American Revolution? Not a foreign power, not some overseas enemy coming to take that freedom away. Their greatest fear was a central government in D.C. that could take away the power and the freedom of the people by using government powers. That's exactly what they fought against. They fought against their own government, King George, and a parliament that thought they had the right to rule heavy-handed over the American people. They learned better, that they couldn't do that. But now we have a government that is trying to do it again. The Founding Fathers weren't worried that we'd have a central government that was too big, too strong. They didn't worry that we'd have one that is too weak, too decentralized, but they did worry that we'd have one that was too big and too strong. And that's why we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And sticking to the terms of that Constitution is essential to our freedom. We are seeing a Washington that tramples the Constitution and believes they do have not just the right, but the power and the intelligence to tell us how to live our lives. Well, let me tell you something. I would rather have anybody in this room working with me and making decisions than the Obama administration, the soon-to-be ex-Hillary Clinton Secretary of State administration, or any other of those liberal governments who think they are smarter and more intelligent than we are. But we have to take back that government when we win the presidency in 2016. Let me tell you one of the first things I would do. Reduce the size of the federal workforce by at least 15%. It is too big. We have too many bureaucrats, too many federal workers. It has to be scaled back. And by the way, when we repeal Obamacare, we won't need as many bureaucrats in the health department. When we get rid of Common Core, we won't need as many workers in the education department. When we stop the EPA trying to shut down American energy, we won't need as many bureaucrats in the EPA. And when we end the political use of government bureaucrats, we can have a much smaller IRS and get rid of every one of them involved in those political scandals. We can reduce the size of the federal workforce by at least 15%. There are those who are going to be saying, well, you really can't do that. I'll tell you something. I know we can. Because when I became governor of New York, I saw the same thing. A bureaucracy, a government that was too big, too bloated. They'd trip over each other trying to come up with new forms that the taxpayers had to fill out. And when I left, the state government had been reduced by over 25,000 workers, more than 15%. We did it in the bluest of the blue states. We can do it in Washington, D.C. as well. But of course, reform in Washington and taking it back and making it the servant of the people and not our master doesn't just end there. Start next with the tax code. Our tax code, our IRS tax code, is an abomination that is incomprehensible. Do you know how many pages constitute the IRS code and all the rulings and regulations and exemptions and credits? 74,600 pages of incomprehensible, lawyer-written, lobbyist-driven gobbledygook. It has got to go. It is a tribute to the special interests and the lobbyists' ability to get special breaks for their powerful clients at the expense of the American people. Do you know how many exemptions and credits the total every year of income taxes are exempt from taxation because of credits and exemptions and loopholes and other gimmicks? $1.3 trillion. $1.3 trillion a year. Get rid of all those exemptions. Get rid of all those special interest credits. Get rid of all those loopholes. Lower the rates on the American people and small business dramatically. Lower the corporate rate. Lower the rate on manufacturing even more. We will balance the budget. We will have surpluses. We will grow the economy. And we will put those lobbyists and lawyers out of business and make the government our servant, as it should be. And as you heard, 6 of the 10 wealthiest counties in America today surround Washington, D.C. Think about that for a minute. What do they make? They're not the financial capital of the world like New York. It's not the energy capital of the world like Houston. It's not the entertainment and media capital like Los Angeles or the innovative capital like the Silicon Valley. They make those loopholes, credits, exemptions, special laws that take care of their clients to the tune of over $1 trillion a year at our expense, and it has to stop. Let me tell you, we not only have to throw out that tax code, simplify it. I would keep just a handful of credits. I would keep the home mortgage deduction credit. I think that's important. I would keep the child care credit. In fact, I'd look at expanding it because raising a child is critical and we want to help our families come together and be successful in doing that. And I'd keep the charitable deduction, but I'd make a change so that the Clinton Foundation wouldn't quite qualify. When your charitable foundation spends more on travel and food and hiring political cronies, you're not going to qualify for the charitable deduction when we get through rewriting the IRS code. Sorry, Hillary. Sorry, Bill. No more living off taxpayer subsidies. We not only have to shrink the size of the government, throw out the tax code and break the special interest stranglehold on so much of Washington, end crony capitalism, we have to change the way Washington works. And I imagine most of you have had the chance to visit our nation's capital. And I remember I went in the 8th grade with my class, and I was so inspired, to see this, our nation's capital. I was young and ran up the Washington Monument. I don't think I could do that today. I saw the Lincoln Memorial and Congress, and I was so moved. I go there today. It's like I'm on a foreign planet. It's like a different country. They talk to each other instead of to us. They listen to each other instead of to us. They talk in a language that is coded and seemingly completely divorced from the American people. And we have to change the way Washington operates. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Today, there are over 400 former members of the House and Senate who are registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C. You get elected in Washington from anywhere, from any party. You play the game. You're set for life. You don't have to go home. You can stay in Washington and make 10 times as much, peddling special influence instead of caring about the people who sent you to Washington in the first place. I would propose a law. You serve 1 day in the House, 1 day in the Senate. There is a lifetime ban on your ever being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., period. You pass a law that you impose on the American people like Obamacare. Any law you pass that applies to the American people has to apply to every member of Congress and their staffs as well. No special rules for Congress. Term limits. We don't want to have career people in office throughout their lives. There are some great people, but the concept of our founding fathers was that citizens would take a time from their lives, devote it to public service, and go back to their community. We see too little of that now. We need term limits on the House and Senate members. And by the way, if you don't do your job, you shouldn't get paid. Under Harry Reid, for 6 years, the Senate did not pass one budget. Another reform, if you're in Congress, you don't pass a budget, you don't get paid. Do your job or suffer the consequences instead of us suffering the consequences. Again, people are saying you can't do it. It's Washington, too many people dependent on government. I know you can. Because New York, when I took over, had been a 20-year unfettered experiment in big government liberal democracy. And what did it lead to? We had the highest tax burden in America, and we were last in jobs. We had the lowest credit rating in America and a $5 billion deficit. We were the most dangerous nation in America, the most dangerous. When I took office, because of liberal, compassionate care for the poor, 1 in 11 of every man, woman, and child in the state of New York was on welfare. Think about that. Not dependent on Social Security or disability, welfare. And when I ran as a Republican conservative, and I'm the only person in the history of the state ever having been elected on the Republican and the Conservative Party lines, people were saying, how are you going to change that? Well, quite simply, when I left, we had reduced the government by 15%. We had cut taxes by $143 billion, more than the other 49 states combined. We had turned those $5 billion deficits into multi-billion-dollar surpluses. We had created over 700,000 private sector jobs. We had gone from the most dangerous state to the fourth safest state in America. And by the way, we had reduced dependency. We had reduced those welfare rolls by over 1 million people, replacing dependency with opportunity. That's what Republicans do. That's what conservative policy does. We had an experiment in liberalism. It failed. We had a trial of conservatism. It succeeded, but you knew that would be the case. You know, when I began, I said there are two threats to our freedom. A too powerful Washington that believes it is smarter and better than we are, and radical Islam. And to me, you know, Dave, when he introduced me, mentioned September 11th. I will never forget that day or its aftermath, or the lesson of September 11th. And that is that we cannot believe that because radical Islam is thousands of miles away, separated by an ocean, that we are safe here in America. Think of what happened last week. Think of Garland, Texas. 2 radicalized Islamist terrorists with AK-47s were going to this event, and they were going to, if they had had their way, kill as many innocent Americans as possible. But for that one brave Texas cop, it could have been another Fort Hood massacre. They were radicalized here. And today you'll listen to some of the press, and they'll say, well, it was a provocative conference. You know, we shouldn't do things like that. Year after year, month after month, week after week, we have seen assaults on Christianity in the name of art. Obnoxious shows, but it was always, this is America, freedom of press, they're entitled to do it. Well, let me say this to the leftists in the press. If it's okay to use art to criticize Christianity the way it's been done year after year, it's okay to have a conference that criticizes Islam in Texas as well, and they deserve our protection and freedom. And think about what almost happened and how that came about. 2 Americans were radicalized through the internet by those engaged in recruiting and inspiring people to either join ISIS or to engage in radical Islamic terror against their fellow Americans here. I'm a great believer in the First Amendment, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. During World War II, you couldn't put up a poster recruiting for the Nazi government. In 2015, we must shut down every radical Islamist trying to recruit people for ISIS here, trying to radicalize people here. It is a crime, whether it's on the internet, from a mosque, in a prison. Shut it down and protect us here. And there's no question in my mind it is constitutional, because it was the Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson from upstate New York who said, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. The First Amendment does not require us to allow our enemies to recruit, train, and inspire hatred and violence here. And, you know, you've had a lot of people talk about radical Islam, and having lived through September 11th, I'm going to say a bunch more on that as well. You know, it's not just shutting down radical Islamist recruiting here in America. It's also when you go after cancer, you don't just remove the tentacles, you have to destroy the tumor. Think about Al-Qaeda on September 11th. They were remote in Afghanistan. They controlled no territory. They had virtually no money. They had no social network capability. They didn't have any weapons. The most sophisticated weapon was a box cutter, and they had no Westerners in their midst. And yet they carried out those horrible attacks. Think of ISIS today, controlling territory, hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of Westerners with passports who can go back. They have recruitment centers, training centers, social media centers, planning and getting ready to attack us here. We must attack and destroy those centers over there. We must kill them there before they have the chance to kill us here again. Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, yes, better arm the Peshmerga and better train the Peshmerga. Yes, stand with the Jordanians and the Sunni Anbar sheiks who are on our side. Arm them as well. But if it takes American boots on the ground, not $1 trillion in a 10-year effort to create a democracy where one has never existed, but a short strike to destroy those centers, recruitment centers, social media centers, kill as many of them possible, then get out and leave a little note. You come back, so will we. America is going to be safe. You know, I don't say this lightly, because I know we have honored those of you who have been in the military earlier today. I have 2 sons. My older son, when he got out of college, became a Marine lieutenant and served for a year in Anbar. My younger son, when he got out of college, joined the 10th Mountain Division and trained in air assault and got back from Afghanistan in September. I know what it's like for a parent to lie awake at home hoping there's no phone call in the middle of the night. Thankfully, my sons made it back alive. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of all of you. I do not want, you are the best America produces. And sadly, I also know when you do get the phone call of someone in your family who has lost his life defending our freedom, the pain and the suffering that creates, that never goes away. But we cannot simply fear to engage in an enemy that is preparing every day to attack us. We must destroy them there. We must make sure the next president has to take a pledge today that there will never be a path to Iranian nuclear weapons. A state sponsor of terror can't have that. We have to stand with our allies. Yes, Israel must know they can count on us, but it's more than just Israel. It's countries like Egypt, because when they threw out the Muslim Brotherhood, which Obama and Hillary embraced, that was destroying churches and killing Coptic Christians, they replaced them with a government that is anti-Islamist. We should stand with them as well. Everyone, we should stand with every country who will join us in this fight. You know, we will be safe. We will take back Washington. We will be America again. I'm from New York, and when people think of New York, they go, oh, New York City. Well, I grew up upstate in a little town called Peekskill on a farm. My 4 grandparents were all immigrants who came here. 3 of them couldn't speak a word of English. 1 of them spoke Irish with such an Irish brogue, nobody could understand her anyway. She was absolutely great. My father couldn't speak English when he went to the 1st grade. We worked on the farm. He and my mom worked on the farm. We learned the values of family and hard work, and they taught us, you know, you might not have wealth or connections. This is America. You believe in yourself. You have faith in your dream. You work hard. Go to school. And there is nothing that can prevent you from achieving that dream. And from my mailman father and my sainted mother, we have my brother, who is an astrophysicist, and I had the privilege of leading New York State for 12 years. Our job today is to make America safe, to make America confident, and to make sure that every person in America, every child born today, whether they're born in downtown Baltimore or upstate New York, has that same faith in the future of this great country, that they can believe that their dream through hard work, faith, family, and education can come true. Take back Washington. Provide for our security and safety overseas and at home. And I can guarantee you we're still America. We still have the entrepreneurial spirit. We still have the best workforce. We still have the most patriotic people in the world. Stand together, take back this country in 2016, and I guarantee you the best of America is ahead of us, and the 21st century is going to be the greatest century this country has ever seen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your belief in freedom, and thank you for helping us take back America. Tomorrow's Mother's Day. My sainted mother is 99 and still going strong. She could not accept a full college scholarship when she got out of high school because it was the Depression and she was the only one working. She spent her life supporting her parents and then my brother and I. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. There's no more important job in America or the world than being a great mother. To all of you, thank you. God bless you. We love you. Happy Mother's Day. God bless America. Thank you.